Welcome back to the Paranormal Inc. Ohio podcast, the podcast where history, mystery, and the unexplained collide. Tonight's episode takes us to St. Louis, Missouri, where one of America's wealthiest families built an empire that seemed designed to last forever. Instead, it became known for unimaginable tragedy. Some people believe the Lemp family suffered from depression, overwhelming grief, and the pressure that came with enormous wealth. Others believe something darker followed their bloodline from one generation to the next. Before we begin, it's important to make one thing clear. Everything you'll hear about the Lemp family, their business empire, their personal lives, and the tragic deaths that occurred is based on documented historical records. The idea that the family was cursed, it is a legend. There is no historical proof that a supernatural curse existed, but after hearing the facts, you may understand why so many people believed there had to be something beyond coincidence. So dim the lights, put on your headphones, and let's travel back to the 19th century, to the beginning of one of America's most haunting family stories. Our story begins in Germany. During the early 1800s, many Germans dreamed of a better life across the Atlantic. Among them was Johann Adam Lemp, a skilled brewer who understood something that few Americans did at the time. Beer wasn't just a drink. For many German immigrants, it was a part of everyday life. Johann immigrated to the United States and eventually settled in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time, St. Louis was growing rapidly. Its population was exploding. Businesses were opening, railroads were expanding, German immigrants were arriving by the thousands. Johann began producing a traditional lager beer using recipes he'd learned in Germany. Unlike many brewers at the time, he discovered something unique beneath the city: massive natural limestone caves. Before refrigeration existed, these caves remained cold throughout the year. They provided nearly perfect conditions for fermenting and storing beer. That discovery would change everything. Demand for Lemp beer exploded. What began as a small family operation soon became one of America's largest breweries. Barrels of beer left St. Louis by wagon, by train, and eventually by rail lines stretching across the country. By the late 19th century, the Lemp Brewery employed hundreds of workers. The family became incredibly wealthy. Their mansion reflected that success. Located on South 13th Street in St. Louis, it wasn't simply a home, it was a symbol of power. Elegant woodwork, imported furnishings, private servants, lavish parties, business leaders, politicians, social elites. Everyone knew the name Lemp from the outside. From the outside, their lives looked perfect, but behind the expensive walls, pressure was building. William J. Lemp. As Johann grew older, leadership passed to his son, William. William possessed remarkable business instincts. He modernized operations, expanded production, invested in new technology. Under his leadership, the brewery became one of the largest beer producers in America. Money seemed limitless. Newspapers praised the family's success. Other businessmen admired William's intelligence. Yet those closest to him described someone very different from the public image. William was quiet, reserved, private. He preferred spending time with his family over attending social events, especially with one person, his son, Friedrich. Friedrich Lemp wasn't simply another wealthy young man. He represented the future of the entire family empire. Employees expected him to someday take over the brewery. His father believed Friedrich possessed the intelligence and the character necessary to lead. The two shared an unusually close relationship. Business discussions often included Friedrich. Family members later recalled how proud William was whenever his son's name came up. For William, the brewery wasn't simply about money. It was about legacy. Everything he had built, everything his father had built, would someday belong to Friedrich. Then, without warning, the future disappeared. Around the turn of the 20th century, Friedrich became seriously ill. Historical records indicate he suffered from health complications that doctors struggled to treat. Medical science at the time lacked many of the treatments we take for granted today. Despite every effort, Friedrich's condition worsened. His family watched helplessly. Then, at only 28 years old, Friedrich died. The loss devastated the Lemp family. Friends later described William as a completely different man afterward. He withdrew from business, he avoided visitors, he spent long periods alone. The laughter that once filled the mansion faded into silence. Many historians believe the single event marked the emotional collapse of William J. Lemp. Those who believed in the supernatural would later point to Friedrich's death as the moment tragedy began tightening its grip on the family. Imagine walking through a mansion where every room reminds you of someone you lost. The dining room, the grand staircase, the library, each memory becoming another painful reminder. Servants noticed changes. William spoke less, he smiled less. Sometimes he locked himself away for hours. The bustling home gradually became quiet. Some later claimed the atmosphere itself changed. Modern paranormal investigators who have visited the Lemp Mansion often describe it as unusually heavy. Some report feeling sadness before they know anything about the family's history. Others report cold spots, footsteps, or the feeling of being watched. Those experiences remain personal accounts, not proven facts, but they have helped fuel the legends surrounding the mansion. As if losing Friedrich wasn't enough, new challenges surrounded the brewery. Competition increased, the industry changed, William's physical health declined alongside his emotional state. Friends urged him to rest. Others encouraged him to seek medical treatment for what today might be recognized as severe depression. Mental health, however, was poorly understood in 1904. People often suffered in silence. February 13, 1904, William remained inside his bedroom. Sometime that morning, a gunshot echoed through the mansion. Servants rushed upstairs. They discovered William J. Lemp had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The nation was stunned. Newspapers across America carried the story. One of the country's wealthiest businessmen gone. People searched for answers. Some blamed grief. Others blamed failing health. Still others whispered something almost impossible. Maybe the Lemp family had become cursed. At the time, it was only a rumor, but history had only just begun writing the darkest chapters of the family story. One tragic death could be explained, 2 tragic deaths still possible. But what happens when history repeats itself again and again and again? In this next part, we'll follow the next generation of the Lemp family as more shocking deaths unfold. The brewery begins to crumble and rumors of a family curse spread throughout St. Louis. We'll also explore how the mansion transformed from one of America's grandest homes into one of the most famous allegedly haunted locations. In part 1, we followed the incredible rise of the Lemp Brewery and the heartbreaking death of William J. Lemp after his loss of his beloved son, Friedrich. For many families, that would have been the end of the tragedy. For the Lemps, it was only the beginning. Over the next several decades, death would visit the family again and again and again. Each new tragedy made the whispers louder. People throughout St. Louis began asking a question that still lingers today. Was the Lemp family simply plagued by terrible luck, or had something attached itself to their bloodline? Tonight we'll continue explaining the documented history and separate it from the legends that followed. William Billy Lemp takes over. Following William J. Lemp's death, leadership of the brewery passed to another son, William Billy Lemp Jr. Unlike his father, Billy inherited a business entering one of the most difficult periods in American history. The brewery remained successful for a time, but trouble was already brewing on the horizon. Across the country, a growing temperance movement argued that alcohol was destroying families and communities. Politicians began pushing for stricter laws. For brewers, it was an alarming trend. For the Lemp family, it threatened everything they had built. Billy tried to keep the company moving forward, but the pressure was immense. He wasn't only trying to preserve a business, he was trying to protect his family's legacy. Then came one of the greatest disasters any brewery could face: Prohibition. In 1920, the 18th Amendment officially banned the manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages across the United States. For countless breweries, it meant financial ruin. For the Lemps, it was catastrophic. The family attempted to survive by producing non-alcoholic beverages and other products. Like many breweries, they searched desperately for another source of income. But it wasn't enough. Eventually, the once mighty Lemp Brewery closed its doors. The business that had made the family one of the richest in America was gone. Imagine spending generations building an empire, only to watch it disappear. For members of the Lemp family, the emotional toll was enormous. While the family struggled financially and emotionally, another tragedy unfolded. William's younger brother, Charles Lemp, was known as a quiet man who preferred animals over business. He lived in the family mansion with several beloved dogs. Historical records describe Charles as deeply attached to them. And tragedy struck once again. One of the dogs died. To many people, losing a pet is heartbreaking. For Charles, it seemed to deepen an already fragile emotional state. On May 10, 1949, Charles Lemp died by suicide inside the family mansion. He was 77 years old. Before taking his own life, he reportedly arranged for his remaining dogs to be euthanized so it would not be left alone. That heartbreaking detail has remained one of the most discussed aspects of his death. Once again, another member of the Lemp family had died by taking their own life inside the same house. The rumors grew stronger. The tragedies weren't limited to the men in the family. William J. Lemp's daughter, Elsa Lemp, lived much of her life away from the spotlight. Unlike several of her brothers, she did not help run the brewery. She experienced many of the same family losses that had haunted the Lemps for decades. In 1920, Elsa died in her home. Historical records state that her death was ruled accidental after she was found with a gunshot wound. Even so, because of the family's long history of tragedy, speculation quickly spread. Some believe there was more to this story. No evidence has ever confirmed those rumors. But in the public imagination, another mysterious death became another chapter in the growing legend of the Lemp curse. As members of the family died and moved away, the mansion slowly changed. The elegant parties ended, the laughter disappeared. Rooms that had once welcomed business leaders and politicians now sat empty. Neighbors noticed how quiet the estate had become. Stories began circulating throughout St. Louis. People claimed lights appeared in empty windows. Others reported hearing footsteps when no one was inside. Some insisted they heard piano music echoing through the mansion late at night. There is no historical evidence proving these stories, but they spread from neighbor to neighbor to neighbor to neighbor, generation after generation. Eventually, the mansion gained a reputation as one of the city's most haunted buildings. When historians study the Lemp family, they often point towards several possible explanations. They note that the repeated grief can affect generations. Mental illness can run in families. The pressure of maintaining enormous wealth and public expectations can become overwhelming. The collapse of the brewery devastated family members who had devoted their lives to it. These are documented realities. Paranormal investigators, however, ask different questions. Why do so many tragedies happen to one family? Why did several deaths occur inside the same mansion? Why do so many visitors today describe feelings of overwhelming sadness before learning anything about the family's history? No one has definitive answers. The evidence allows us to document the tragedies. It does not allow us to prove a curse, and yet the legend refuses to die. Part 3 will leave the history books behind and step inside the mansion as it exists today. We'll examine reports from employees, guests, paranormal investigators, and television crews who claim they've encountered unexplained voices, shadow figures, disembodied footsteps, and apparitions believed to be members of the Lemp family. We'll also ask the ultimate question: can a house absorb generations of grief? Or Are people simply experiencing the power of suggestion inside a place filled with heartbreaking history? We'll examine the evidence. I'll let you decide. Over the last 2 parts, we've explored the documented history of the Lemp family. We follow their rise from German immigrants to one of America's wealthiest brewing dynasties. We've witnessed the heartbreaking death of Friedrich Lemp, the unaliving of William J. Lemp, the collapse of the brewery during Prohibition, the death of Charles Lemp, and the tragic losses that seem to follow generation after generation. Every one of those events is supported by historical records. But tonight, we move from history into the realm of reported paranormal experiences. So if you followed me this long through all the facts, and you're here for the paranormal, here's the spot. It's important to remember that the accounts you're about to hear are claims made by witnesses, employees, investigators, and guests. They are not scientifically verified facts. Yet for more than a century, the former Lemp Mansion has developed a reputation as one of the Missouri's most famous allegedly haunted locations. The question is, why? A mansion with a heavy history. After the Lemp family left the mansion, the property changed hands several times. What had once been a symbol of unimaginable wealth became something very different. Eventually, the building was restored and today operates as a restaurant or an inn, an event venue. Thousands of visitors have walked through its halls. Many come simply to enjoy the historic building. Others arrive hoping to experience something they cannot explain. Employees have reported hearing footsteps on empty floors after closing. Some have described doors opening on their own. Others have claimed lights switched on in rooms they had just locked. Could old buildings naturally creak and settle? Absolutely they can. Could electrical problems explain some reports? Certainly. But not every witness believes those explanations fit what they experienced. One of the most frequently repeated stories involves sightings of a dark human-shaped figure near the staircase. Several guests have claimed they noticed someone standing silently before the figure suddenly disappeared. Some initially assumed it was another visitor. Others thought it might have been an employee. Only later did they realize no one else had been there. Shadow figure reports are common in haunted locations around the world. Whether they are caused by lighting, misinterpretation, expectation, or something genuinely unexplained remains a subject of debate. No photograph has consistently proven these sightings. Still, the stories continue. Employees have also described hearing voices when no one else was present. Some report hearing their names whispered. Others have heard what sounded like conversations taking place in completely empty rooms. A few have even said they followed the sounds, only to find nothing. Paranormal investigators often refer to these reports as disembodied voices. Skeptics point out that the old buildings can carry sound in unusual ways. Both explanations deserve consideration. One unexplained experience alone proves very little. But decades of similar reports from unrelated people have helped build the mansion's reputation. I know that people say that old buildings make noises, but I don't see how old building can make noises that sound like words that intelligently answer questions that us as paranormal investigators ask. It can't simply just be a noise or our brains playing tricks on us. You ask a question and it intelligently answers, and you hear it audibly, but there's no one around. I understand that the brain is such a strong part of the body and can do anything, but I also believe that spirits try to communicate with us. Perhaps the most common experience isn't seeing a ghost at all. It's a feeling. Many visitors describe an overwhelming sensation that someone is standing just behind them. Some say they suddenly become anxious for no obvious reason. Others report chills despite comfortable temperatures. Psychologists note that our brains are remarkably sensitive to unfamiliar environments. Historic buildings, dim lighting, and emotional experiences can all influence perception. At the same time, those who believe in hauntings argue that intense emotional events may somehow leave an imprint on a location. There is currently no scientific evidence confirming that idea, but it remains one of the most discussed theories in paranormal research. Over the years, numerous paranormal investigation teams have explored the mansion, using audio recorders, cameras, motion sensors, and environmentally monitoring equipment. Investigators have searched for evidence of unexplained activity. Some teams report capturing unusual sounds, others documented unexplained equipment malfunctions. A few investigators believed they recovered electronic voice phenomenon, often called EVPs, short sounds or voices that they believed appearing during audio review. Supporters consider some of these recordings intriguing. Skeptics argue that many can be explained by background noise, radio interference, or the human tendency to hear meaningful words and random sounds. To date, no investigation has produced evidence that has convinced the wider scientific community that the mansion is haunted. Whether paranormal activity exists there or not, one fact cannot be denied. The mansion witnessed extraordinary grief. Within those walls, family members celebrated success, they mourned children, they watched an empire crumble, and multiple members of the family died there. History alone gives the building an emotional weight that few places possess. Sometimes knowing what happened in a location changes how we experience it. Other times people leave convinced they encountered something they cannot explain. Both experiences are real to the individuals who had them. The interpretation is where opinions differ. Now we return to the question that began the series. Was the Lemp family cursed? From a historical standpoint, there is no evidence that a supernatural curse was responsible for the tragedies that struck the family. Historians generally point to a combination of grief, mental illness, changing economic conditions, I can't even read my own words, and the enormous pressures faced by one of America's most prominent families. Those explanations are supported by historical research. The idea of a curse grew because the tragedies were so numerous and so heartbreaking. When people struggle to understand repeated misfortune, they often search for a larger explanation. Sometimes that explanation becomes a legend. The Lemp family curse is one of those legends. Whether it's only a legend or something more is ultimately a question each person must answer for themselves. Myself, I believe it's a curse. Stories like the Lemp families remind us that some of history's most chilling tales don't require monsters. Sometimes the greatest horrors are grief, loss, and the lasting scars they leave behind. The Lemp Mansion stands today as both a historic landmark and the center of countless ghost stories. Some visitors leave with nothing more than admiration for its architecture. Others leave convinced they were never truly alone. Whatever your conclusion, the documented history of the Lemp family is tragic enough to stand on its own. And perhaps that's what makes the legend so enduring. Because the line between history and haunting is something thinner than we think. If you enjoyed tonight's episode of Paranormal Link Ohio podcast, be sure to follow the podcast and share it with someone who loves true history and the unexplained as much as we do. Till next time, I'm your host, Ed. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, not every ghost story begins with a ghost. Sometimes it begins with a family whose history is so heartbreaking that the echoes never seem to fade. Thank you guys so much for coming and checking out tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I love each and every single one of you, and you will hear from me tomorrow. Bye, everyone.